I am Alice of KHR Arts and Cloud Orchid Publishing, and today I am going to talk to y'all about how I go about writing my stories, specifically the question of inspiration. So this is a bit of a tricky question that I get asked a lot in a lot of interviews and just honestly in general. People ask it of me at conventions, on panels, people will DM me asking me this question, and I'll give different answers a lot of the time, and really the truth is it's kind of all over the place. I don't really have anything that like super specifically inspires my writing overall. And a lot of times when people ask me this question, they aren't asking like, oh, what inspired you to write Succumb to Darkness? Or what inspired you to write this poetry collection? Or whatever. A lot of times they're asking me, why are you a writer? What made you just decide one day to be a writer and start writing stories? Like, what drives you to be a writer? And I've covered that in some of my other videos, that writing is ma raison d'être, my reason for being. Writing is like breathing for me. A life without writing for me is death. I can't not do it. It's a disease. I have to do it. I am compelled to do it. There is no inspiration behind writing in general. It's just a thing that I do. That can be hard for some people to understand. And I don't really have a great way to really explain what that feels like, because it's kind of like asking somebody what drives you to breathe, what drives your heart to beat, what drives you, to digest your food. It's like these are unconscious things. Like, I don't think about it, I just do it. And that's kind of what writing is for me. It's just a thing that I do. Let's go a little bit deeper than it just being this wild compulsion that I just have to do at all times. And I've talked about this in some of my other videos too, but at all times there is a whole world going on up here, y'all, in my head, like full everything. And I've been told by some of my friends who do what we'll call extracurriculars, my brain functions the way that somebody's brain functions on extracurriculars, even though I have never done extracurriculars in my entire life ever. And I've been specifically told by these friends that do these things, don't. Because my brain is already on that level of the way that it functions. It doesn't function like a normal people brain. I'm also neurodivergent. That's probably a big thing to do with it, as well as I have synesthesia, which I talk about in this video. Long story short, synesthesia is where some wires in your brain are crossed, and I taste colors and I taste words, which heavily influences my writing. I talk about colors a lot in my writing, y'all, and I use certain words a lot in my writing because they taste good. There's literally no larger symbolism other than red tastes good. There's like a whole world going on in my head. And when I say that, it's like when I'm just existing, if I'm sitting doing my day job and I'm working on a boring spreadsheet and my brain is just kind of wandering in the background, when I'm out running errands and my brain is just kind of on autopilot, when I'm actively sitting and writing down a story, just there's stuff going on up here, y'all, and it is like a fully immersive, like 360 panorama movie sort of thing. I'm going to try to describe it to y'all as best as I can because it's difficult if you're not up in here. It's like the scene of the story is happening in my brain and I can see everything that's happening and I can like spin around and see all these different perspectives. I can pull back and have like God view. I can pull in and have like, right up in here view. I can pull and jump to different characters and see their different points of view in any given scene. I can hear everything that's going on. For Love of the Sea scenes, I can smell the ocean. I can hear the waves rolling. It's fully immersive. Like, I'm there. It's happening and I'm there. My life is this weird dichotomy of that it's like I'm doing a task, no matter how mundane. I'm working on an Excel spreadsheet. I'm cooking dinner. I'm emptying the dishwasher. I'm brushing my teeth. I'm shopping at Target. And there's this whole magical world also going on in my head. So like I'm standing in line talking to the pharmacist picking up my pills, and at the same time there is an epic pirate battle going on in my head. And I just have to deal. Like, that's just a thing that's happening, and I have to use as much brain power as I have available to focus on what the pharmacist is saying at me while epic pirate battle is happening for no reason. I have no control over this either. No control. So I don't get to be like, oh yeah, I'd like to like pause the video, please. There is no pause. There is no pause. There is, however, I like to call it like the record function, where if I'm like, oh yeah, this right here, this is a really good idea for a book, or this is a really good idea for a scene for this book, or whatever. Or maybe sometimes I even utilize it where I'm like, oh yeah, this is really good for like a painting that I want to do. And I'll just like, I'll think about it really hard. I'll like dedicate my active brain to being like, all right, we're going to remember this really hard so that then when we have the wherewithal available, we can sit down and we can do something with it. So that's when I can sit down and I can actually work on my writing, or I can work on a drawing, or I can work on a painting or whatever. And I can take all of the crazy that's going on in my brain and I can put it into something that I can share with the world, that everyone else can then see what I see. And that's what I talk about with, I write primarily for me. And this is all about just capturing all of the stuff in my brain and putting it on the page, that I'm not like sitting here and being like, what would be the next best-selling novel? What seems to be the genre trend that I should probably focus on right now? Like, I don't do any of that. When I talk about, thinking about the marketing aspects of your book, I do all of that after the fact. Like, that whole part comes into the late editing stages where I'm like, all right, we got to start thinking about this in terms of the reader, that it needs readability. My readers have to be able to understand what's going on. My readers have to be able to like empathize with the characters. They have to want to come along on this story, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I write those stories for me. I'm getting all this out of my head and I'm like, here, look at this amazingness. I did a thing. Yay. I hope you enjoy it. And, I'm not thinking about formulaic, oh yeah, this genre and this trope and this thing, and I'm going to write this happens and then that happens and blah, blah, blah. Like that's not how the creation process of writing is for me. Like that's later stage editing and organizing and all that kind of stuff, taking stuff like that into consideration. The very early stages of me writing where I'm like, I have an idea and I'm gonna write it and it's gonna be fun, is just pure just all of this craziness that's going on. People don't realize that it's just like that 24/7, just all the time. There are people that are like, oh, I have to like sit down and I have to get in the zone, or I listen to a certain kind of music, or I have to do a certain thing, or I have to meditate, or, whatever. Like there's like this magic code that they have to punch in to be like, bleep, bloop, inspiration, please. There's no off switch. It's just, my brain's just been on full like LSD mode since I came online and was a sentient human. It's just my brain just assaults me with stuff. Just 24/7, which is also, I've talked about this in some of my other videos, as well as like I've talked about this heavily on my social media platforms, is I really struggle with sleeping. And that is one of the things that I struggle with the most, and that really impacts my health, is a battle for me, is sleeping is hard. And it's because I suffer from chronic nightmares. And the reason why I suffer from chronic nightmares is largely because of a lot of the trauma I've had over the course of my life, but also because of this just going 24/7 and it won't shut up. And for whatever reason, when it's time for bed, my brain just suddenly switches and decides to be like, hey, let me just show you terrifying stuff for no reason. It's like, thanks, brain. I didn't need that. And when I go to bed and I'm actually asleep, my brain will come up with like the most terrifying nightmares that I'm not going to share here because it re-traumatizes me every time to think about them, as well as I don't want to traumatize y'all. They're really horrible. If y'all want to like know what my nightmares are like, go and pick up The Asylum. That book is a really good encapsulation of my nightmares. Also my poetry collection, Synesthesia Darkness, also really good descriptor for my nightmares. And Absent Ventriloquist. That one is definitely a deep dive into my psychosis and my nightmares. And Oni. Yeah, that one too. Basically, anytime I write horror, it's not even me being like, I'm going to write horror. It's, here, let me just purge this horrible nightmare. Enjoy. You deal with it. I don't want it anymore. Please take it. Like, that's when people are like, oh, you write horror? I'm like, yes, it's taking the trauma and making it go away. I'm putting it somewhere else. Making it someone else's problem. I don't go out of my way to try to invent more horrible things. My brain does it just fine all by itself. So that's definitely the downside. to having this is it makes sleeping literally a nightmare. It's awful. Let me tell y'all, when you're trying to go to sleep, that you're probably going to have nightmares and they're going to be horrible and you're going to wake up feeling exhausted and feeling like, why did I bother going to sleep? That is my life. That's why I used to drink so much coffee. That's why I used to stay up for days at a time, because I'm like, I don't want to sleep. Can I just not, please? I still don't want to sleep. I hate sleeping, but I do it because my doctor and my therapist are like, for the love of God, please sleep because you're going to die if you don't. And I'm like, okay, great. Super. So that's definitely the downside, is sleep is a nightmare. And also the downside of that, combined with my ADHD, paying attention is a challenge when you have a TV inside your head, basically. And the funny thing is, in order to better focus on my work, I'm typically watching cartoons to keep that part of my brain busy so that it focuses on that and I'm not thinking about new thoughts so that I can focus on my work. That's a little hack that I've been able to figure out over the years that keeps my brain busy. The thoughts still happen, the scenes and the magic and everything still happens, it's just not as loud. And the most purest form of that you can find in my poetry collection, Synesthesia Experimental, where I just let my synesthesia absolutely run wild. Honestly, that book is kind of just what it sounds like in my brain, just all day. Just absolute nonsense and craziness and just pictures flying around and just full movie scenes, and suddenly I'm transported to different places. It's wild, y'all. It's absolutely wild. Not to be confused with, I'm not hallucinating. I know where I am. I can see and experience where I am, but it's at the same time as experiencing this other stuff inside of my head. So it's kind of this weird thing where it's like, here is reality that I am experiencing with you, and here's this other stuff over here inside my head that I am also experiencing at the same time. And sometimes it's a little confusing, especially the more stressed out I am and the more tired I am, the more the line blurs, and that's also a problem. I've had problems with that in the past. But I'm an adult and we work on that. We do our best. So that is the complicated explanation for how all of that works, because it's so difficult to pack all of that into that simple interview question of what inspires you, or when people just ask me, what is it that drives you to write? And I'm like, I don't really have a good answer for that, because the real answer just sounds crazy, because honestly it is. And to be perfectly frank, in order to be a writer or any sort of creative person, you do have to be at least a little bit crazy. So I hope y'all found this video interesting. If you did, please be sure to give it a like, and if you're new, subscribe. All right, y'all, thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye bye.